right. Are we on? We're
Yes,
rolling.
we are. We are back with a very timely episode around how to handle difficult situations that are highly impactful to so many people, given this past week's LA fires that have now been all across social media, that have been a national/international now news story and have still not gotten under control. So our thoughts are with everyone out on the West Coast. And we have so many friends, even family, and also just industry relationships that we've been thinking of out there, even from the East Coast. So first and foremost, want to acknowledge that. And it's also what made us want to get on and share this episode, because so much conversation is happening around how to handle, as a social media content creator, how to handle situations like this. So we're going to kind of break down that in today's episode. We're also going to share in the description box of this episode of some resources that are reputable of how to donate and help for the LA fires that are happening right now. But with that, let's jump into this episode. As a creator, it is really, I mean, it's social media at the end of the day. And it's always a conversation whenever a big story breaks out like this, how to handle that.
Yeah, and we get a lot of creators asking us during these times. Unfortunately, when these things happen, these national tragedies, or global things happening in the world, or even local things that are happening, how do they go about, what do they post? What do they do? What do they say? And so this is more of a resource for creators listening about how to think about some of these situations and how to handle them. And obviously there's never it's never a black and white, easy, right or wrong situation. There are different ways to go about it, but we're here based on things we've seen and our experience and what we recommend. We wanted to chat a little bit about that.
Yeah, even from our creators to even talking this week with brand agency contacts around what they're observing. And I think that it's there, to your point, there is no black and white scenario of how to perfectly handle a situation, but it really comes down to the creator understanding the magnitude of what a particular event is having. Because yes, the argument can be made, well, there's bad stuff that happens every single day. And sure, unfortunately, that is the case. There is bad stuff that happens every day. But looking at the social magnitude of something is really important as a step one. And understanding what conversations have now taken over social media, and then what role that creator has in what they're playing with their community on social when that happens. And I do think that there is a difference between a situation like the LA wildfires and then a situation that's more politically fueled.
Right.
To me, I'm like, LA, this situation there should be no politics involved.
No.
It's just like, this is a horrible situation that's happening.
Yeah.
That's impacting people, to animals, to wildlife, to the city itself. I'm like, that's completely different. Like, everyone needs to set their own opinions aside.
Yeah, and I think if you have a platform, you have followers, you have an audience, and people look up to you, you can influence them in different ways. Not just influence them from buying things, but influence them in what you say, and you're kind of a role model, honestly, to a lot of people watching you from all different age ranges too. That if you at least acknowledge it, I think that's our biggest takeaway, is at least acknowledge it. You don't have to get involved in the discussions. Agreed. Or, we're not here to break down the details of the LA fires or why this happened or what could have been better or what they could have been doing or what they should be doing. It's not about that, or you have to get involved in that kind of discussion. It's more so just acknowledging, hey, I understand what's going on. This week I'm going to change my content a little bit, what I'm showing. Maybe I had some planned brand deals that were supposed to happen, or normally I would share, affiliate links, or I would share a little bit more branded stuff, maybe,
or a clothing haul.
Those are things that you hold off doing, but you can still share content. I think that's fine.
So yeah, and I think it comes down to having self-awareness of your audience, what they're looking to you for. And again, if things are continuing on as business as usual, I truly do think that creators are, it not only is that not socially responsible, but it's also negatively impacting your business
Yeah.
as a creator, because as a brand, brands and agencies are watching this. Your audience is watching this. So not having that surface level approach to a situation, again, of this magnitude, again, that's not politically fueled as well. And again, even if something is politically fueled, you have to sense out like what's appropriate, what the tone of the conversation is, and not ignore situations completely.
Yes.
And I think that's what you're saying, is having
Yeah.
some level of self-awareness and acknowledgement
Yeah.
of what's happening.
Yeah, and in my opinion, you don't even have to come out with a public statement. You know, I think some creators feel like, well, I'm not comfortable talking about that, or I don't know enough about it, or I don't feel like I have enough expertise in talking about this. But at the same time, that's completely fine. But it's also, you don't have to do like a public statement. It can be even something like what I mentioned earlier, where maybe you're just the type of content that you're posting that week is more, you know, it's kind of like you're showing that you're aware without telling people. It's kind of like, hey, this week, here are some things that I'm doing to de-stress or relax or, you know, be at peace right now with everything that's happening. It can be as simple as that, without feeling like you have to go on a long, you know, explanation of what's going on. Because I don't think some people just aren't comfortable doing that.
Right. And I agree. I think that no creator should feel pressured to come out and speak around a topic that they may not feel fully comfortable speaking to. But that's where also sitting back and observing, and I don't mean sitting back and not doing anything, but observing and even diving into the level of resources that could be shared. And when I say level of, I mean like making sure that if you're going to reshare something, make sure that it's reputable. As a creator, like do your research if you're going to then share that with your community.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's where sharing, whether it's quotes, resources, donation links, ways to give, even supplies in times like this, that's where it's like you're not even speaking out.
Right.
You're just at least sharing reputable sources with your community. That in itself acknowledges a situation like this.
That's another great example.
Yeah.
I like that.
But again, I think also it's a social responsibility to then also do your research to make sure you're sharing things, because I mean, plenty of copycats can set up a GoFundMe page.
You do have to be careful of that.
Yeah. So you have to like do your research of what you're sharing. That is also a responsibility of creators, because that can, those resources can spread quickly too. And you can spread false resources as well. So I think it's important to do your research. And again, you don't have to get on and verbally talk about something if you're not comfortable with it. But I think at least sharing some level of acknowledgement is really impactful to even your business at the end of the day, and not to make this like, oh, this is going to make you a, better business person, like from a monetary standpoint, but also I think it makes you a more socially responsible creator.
Yeah. The other thing too is when it comes to charities or resources or ways that people can donate, I think some people also feel like, from what we've heard, well, I wouldn't normally donate to them, or like I don't necessarily support that type of charity. But what you can do is find things that you are passionate about or that you do have a connection with. And it can be something that, again, it's like another way that you're being connected to your followers and your audience, and you're sharing a resource with them that you personally feel like is helpful, versus feeling like you have to, share something that you're like, okay, this is just like a generic charity. Then I'm like, what's the point? But the point is, then pick something that you feel like is relevant to you.
Right.
And that makes it a little bit more, I think, an easier way to, again, acknowledge something if you don't feel comfortable talking about it.
So an example of this is I've seen some of the even moms in our group sharing motherhood related groups and foundations that are sharing for like baby clothes and baby items, or new moms that need support that have lost everything, or those in the group who are really animal focused and have shared more wildlife foundations, or
pets,
displaced pets, that have been impacted by the fire. And again, this is kind of getting into the weeds, but it is really important to talk about some of the tactics behind, again, tying it back into what's important to a creator.
Yeah.
And you can find a connection with anything, whether it's humans, animals, buildings that have gotten destroyed, businesses that have gotten destroyed, you can find a human connection within anything, sadly, in a situation like this. And that's then what to tie back to the community, because you have community members likely from all over that have been impacted and either directly or indirectly in many ways.
Yeah. And I think the whole point of this podcast episode is really about not to pressure creators to say, if you're not doing this, you're a bad creator.
Yeah.
But I think the moral of the story is, if you don't want to do any of this, at least be sensitive and aware of the type of content that you're posting.
Yes.
And I think that goes a long way, honestly. We see sometimes who are posting like, sponsored content, or which could have been moved, for example.
Yeah.
We know there are campaigns and things that are happening that just, there was a big project or there was a launch date and that you can't be moved. But
I agree. But also I will say this week, all of our brand agency partners were great at moving things and wanted to as well. But yes, I agree. If you're like, I think Pam Anderson was the one that came out where she was launching a movie and she had no option other than like, it was going to launch in theaters that day. And it's like, she didn't have an option other than that was like the planned date. They couldn't push it and came out and acknowledged. Again, it goes back to the acknowledgement, and it gives a level of self-awareness, and then going into a promotion that it's like, this is kind of bad timing, but I have no other option but acknowledging it first. And I would say never hesitate to find a way to shift things around in a time like that. And if it can't be shifted, then at least being upfront around, I understand the situation.
Right. And being sensitive around what's happening.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's the net of ultimately being upfront around your level of comfort with a situation, becoming more knowledgeable of it, deciding where kind of your voice fits within all of that. And then also the magnitude of it, because we've seen plenty of creators who've shared and audience members are like, stuff happens all the time. You didn't talk about this, or this situation. I'm like, but it comes down to the magnitude of it and like the social impact that something is having, and not to minimize these other situations that have happened. Yeah. But I think this type of situation can bring people closer together in times that, even in the past couple of years where some things have felt very divided. Right. I think it brings, unfortunately, it takes things like this to bring people together sometimes.
With that, when it comes to observing and knowing or feeling comfortable when a creator can start posting, what's our recommendation on that?
I think every creator needs to take it a day at a time for their specific community and style of content. There are some creators that do dive in deeper than others, or have more of those deeper conversations with their audience more frequently. And I think that is a different situation than a creator who doesn't share to that extent a lot of the time. Yeah. So I think it really comes down to you as a creator and your particular audience, and then what's happening on social. So again, we never want to be like, back to business as usual. That was last week's drama. Now we're on to something else this week. I'm like, it shouldn't be that way. But at the same time, of course, at the end of the day, things continue to move forward. Life continues to move forward, and you want to move forward in a positive way. So I think easing back into content of helpful, not just resources for donations and things like that, although I think it's really incredible to continue to pepper that in and share that, but also helping communities deal with things from a mental health perspective of like, of course, everyone's on edge and more stressed out, and senses are more heightened this week. So maybe share a little bit more self-care, maybe share a little bit more raw, real kind of day in the life things that you're doing, of just like going to the grocery store and kind of going about your day in a mindful way, but not, again, jumping right back into maybe a haul or something that you, if it doesn't feel right for you and your community at that time, I would say trust your gut and just, stay either quiet or try to share something that is more impactful from a self-care standpoint, mental health standpoint, and again, have that humanness to it. And I think going back to earlier of should people keep sharing or not sharing on social media of like their normal content? Again, I think the better thing, if you don't even want to talk about resources or you don't want to even acknowledge or share at all, then the better thing is just to stay quiet.
Yeah.
Because let other people, at least share positive, impactful content and also resources with the community.
Yeah. And I think also when it comes to timing of, okay, when can I get back to my normal schedule? When can I feel comfortable posting? You kind of have to
keep
understand what's happening.
Yeah.
But I think it does take time for these things to resolve and people get back to normal. And then, things are kind of feeling a little bit more comfortable again. You get back to your normal style of content.
Right.
And again, observing what's happening, whether with brands even and other creators and people in general on social, on the news, like what's the consensus? And then I think using your gut to then decide what to do.
Yeah. Agreed. I think that's really well said. And I think that ultimately at the end of the day, it is, yes, social media is fun and creative and exciting and all of those things, which is why we're in it. We love it. But it should be also about socially responsible impact in a positive way too. And I think that's why we're having this conversation, because this was such a big, unexpected situation that's so tragic to have happened that we would be remiss to not speak on it and also not have an opinion of how creators can tactfully handle this with their audience. And at the end of the day, I wish this was like the one and only event that was going to happen in the future, but sadly, it probably is not. And so I think having the tools and self-awareness and understanding as a content creator that it's still a responsibility to be mindful of how you're approaching a situation of this magnitude.
Yeah. So hopefully this was helpful to everyone listening, watching, especially if you're a creator and this was something that you were wondering or thinking about, or you're a newer creator, even you've never experienced something like this. We wanted to put this out here.
So with that being said, we are going to wrap up this week's episode. If you guys are out on the West Coast, we are sending so many good thoughts your way for hopefully a quick recovery. And we, like I said, we'll share resources that we have found below in the description box. And we will see you guys in next week's episode.
We'll see ya.